On today's Locked On Senators, we chat with our good friend TSN analyst Jamie Noodles McLennan.
Noodles tells us all about his good friend Travis Green as the new head coach of the Sens and what they need to do in the offseason.
We'll get into all that, plus wrapping up our exit interviews with the fourth line, Kastelic, Kelly, and Kubalik. That's all coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Senators podcast. Your team every day.
Your Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I'm Jake Sanderson, and you're listening to Locked On Senators podcast.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
Welcome inside episode 1043 of the Locked On Senators podcast. I'm Ross Levitan on the outskirts of enemy territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. There's no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform you need to build yours. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. You can also follow the show on social media. We're at Sens Central on Twitter, LockedOn.Senators on Instagram. The show is free and available on all podcast platforms, including on YouTube, where we say hello and let you know that a like, comment, and subscription go a long way to helping the show grow. Today is Friday, May 10th, and Pilsy, will this be the final Belleville Sens game day of the season?
No, the season is not over for the Belleville Senators. I mean, Ross, we talked about it. So many of these games for Belleville are going into overtime, one-goal games. They've been close. So I think Belleville's going to really push here, and they want to keep their season alive. Now they know what the atmosphere in Cleveland's like. They've been in Cleveland for a couple days now. So I think they're going to be ready to go, and we're going to see a really good performance from them tonight.
I hope so. I mean, if you're going to make a wager on the game, try overtimes, because four of the 6 playoff games have gone to overtime. Key to victory, Matt Sogard has to be better than Jet Greaves. Greaves, the goaltender for the Cleveland Monsters, has been fantastic this series. That double overtime game, you look at it, and Mads, I mean, the save percentage is great. He made a ton of saves in between, allowing that second goal to go down 2-0, and then ultimately the double OT dagger. But still, you look at 2 out of the 3 goals, and you're like, probably want that back. So that's my hope, is that Mads stands up tonight and plays a great game. Other than that, I think it's about getting the power play going, because it has not been good enough. And they had an opportunity in overtime to finish it on the power play, and they could not convert. So special teams and goaltending, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here, but if the Senators can get that, then I agree with you that Belleville will survive tonight.
And some of their top players need to step it up a little here. Obviously, we love Crooker, we love Igor, we love Clevin, but they haven't been at their best in this series, in my opinion. Igor had 7 shots. He was ripping it, but he just couldn't find the back of the net there. And it was even to a point, Ross, where on the power play, Cleveland was leaving him open because they knew he was just going to rip it. And they knew if Jet Greaves could see it, he was going to stop it. So we got to find a way for Igor to get going on the power play. And Crooker, I'm not sure, maybe the injury he suffered at the end of the year in Ottawa is still lingering a little bit, but he hasn't looked like himself. And then Tyler Clevin, I think, could step up his game as well. So if you can get those 3 guys to really kind of elevate their game to where we know they can play, I think Belleville's going to have a lot more chance at success here, because Stephen Halliday, he's trying to do it all, but he can't do it all. So he's going to need some help from the rest of the offensive firepower here.
Halliday comes into tonight's game second place, alone in second place in playoff scoring, just behind Maverick Bourque. He's got 8 points, 7 of those assists in 6 games. So we'll be looking forward to tonight's game. It's a 7 o'clock Eastern time start on AHL TV, and I'm assuming TSN 1200 will keep track of that game as well. I'm not ready for the season to be over down there. It is just great experience for these kids. Also, Wyatt Bongiovanni just 1 goal in the playoffs after a torrid pace at the end of the regular season.
He's hit a couple posts though, Ross. Like he's been close, and anytime him and Stephen Halliday have a really good connection. Anytime they're on the ice together, Halliday seems to be able to find him in a good scoring opportunity. But just a couple of those nasty posts instead of scoring.
All right, so we'll continue to cover the Belleville Sens as they go on. We've got a great guest on today's show, though, Jamie Noodles McLennan. The 5th time that Noodles has been on the show. He joins a prestigious leaderboard that sees names like Mark Kastelic and others that have been so generous with their time here on Locked On Senators. We truly do appreciate it. Obviously, Ian Mendez up in double digits as well. And the reason why we don't have Noodles on during the season is I want to give this guy his space because he is one of the busiest guys in the industry. 50 Senators games this guy covered all season long. But when I heard the news that Travis Green was hired, obviously first thing I do, hockey world style, you're looking for connections. You're playing that geography game. How do you know who, where, when? And you scroll down, and he played 6 seasons with Jamie McLennan. It's right atop this connections page. So I reach out. I said, hey, lots of pushback. People don't know Travis Green. Tell us about Travis Green. I think that I don't really care if I'm changing people's opinions, but I think this gives some great insight into what not only the fans, but also what the players should expect from Travis Green at training camp.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're trying to do, Ross. Like, I think maybe some people are looking at the episodes and conversations we've had about Travis Green are like, okay, these guys are just carrying water for the team. Look at how bad his record is. His players hated him in Vancouver, blah, blah, blah. And that's fine. Like, you can have that opinion. We don't need to change your mind. What we're trying to do is just bring in voices that have more experience and knowledge about who Travis Green as a player, coach, and person are, because we're not about to pretend that we were dialed in on Travis Green's 4 years in Vancouver and then an interim head coaching stint in New Jersey, right? So we want to bring on people that know him better so that they can let us know what kind of coach the Ottawa Senators are getting here. And I don't know, I think it's, I don't want to say that this is the perfect ideal choice for the Ottawa Senators, but I'm really starting to come around that at least this was a good selection for the Sens and he could be the right guy here.
Noodles on the other side, exit interviews to wrap up the show. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Policy Genius. Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It saves you time and money when you are looking for your insurance. What Policy Genius does is helps you find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year, and you get $1 million worth of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. You want to be able to compare all your options from top companies while having a team of licensed experts to help you. Policy Genius is the spot for you. You can compare quotes from all the top insurers in just a few clicks to find the match that's best for you. Your work life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs. Even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. Policy Genius gives you that unbiased advice from a licensed expert team. You got a whole team helping you here, and they don't have any incentive to recommend one company over another. They're going to find you the best package for your individual needs. Thousands of 5-star reviews on Google. So check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonnhl or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/lockedonnhl.
Today's episode is also brought to you by our very good friends at the Glebe Central Pub. Go visit the Glebe Central Pub at 779 Bank Street and let them know that the fellas at Locked On Senators sent you. They've got great staff, they've got awesome atmospheres, and they also want to make sure it's an interactive environment at the Glebe Central Pub. Not only do they have the darts board, a true classic, you can get lost for hours just hanging out, having pints with your friends and playing some darts, but they also every Saturday night. So tomorrow, live music at the GCP. The vibes truly are free at the GCP. They've got trivia night Every Wednesday, they've got open mic night. There's always something going on at the Glebe Central Pub, and their specials coincide with the days of the week. So with that said, you can get wing nights on Mondays, just 75 cents for wings. On Thursday, how about tacos? $5 tacos at the Glebe Central Pub. The vibe's immaculate. I can't wait to get back to the GCP. Look, Red Black season starting soon. Awesome pregame spot before heading down to Lansdowne. Atletico Ottawa as well. They've got the supporter section as well for the Arsenal bar. I actually need to get down for one of those. It's going to be a complete hoot. These soccer hooligans just having a great time. So you can have a great time too by heading to the Glebe Central Pub. Go visit them at 779 Bank Street and let them know that Locked On Senators sent you. All right, now to our interview with the man himself, Jamie Noodles McLennan. All right, we now welcome one of the good friends of the show back for the 5th time. It's TSN analyst and the co-host of Overdrive on TSN 1050, Jamie Noodles McLennan. Welcome back. How are you doing today, sir?
Not too bad. How you guys doing?
Well, good. We were just talking. There's no real off season for you, but how's the difference in terms of your out of town schedule? Because I feel like you were all over the place this season.
Yeah, I did 50 Senator games, right? So even living in the north of Toronto area, even an Ottawa game is somewhat a road game for me. But I love it. You guys know I love spending time in Ottawa, and then doing half the games on the road with them. With obviously Pooley going into management, I absorbed some of his games. So looking forward to it. I'm anticipating doing another 50 next year, but we'll see. But it was a great year as far as settling in with the group. I've said this before. It wasn't the finish that the group wanted, but being around the Sens, they're a classy organization. The players are awesome to deal with, the staff and all that. So I'm pretty lucky because there's other color guys that probably can't say the same as far as their relationship with the team. But I feel very fortunate for sure.
Now, Noodles, you mentioned you're on the road a lot with the Sens, but nothing crazier. And Ross and I need to applaud you to this, Stick Taps. The journey you did from LA, an overtime game, then you got to come do the trade deadline, then you got to do overdrive after. Was that the most exhausting 48 hours of your life? Had to have been.
You know what? It wasn't bad because I had mentally prepared. So it was kind of like okay, this is what my 48 hours is going to look like, because we were in Anaheim the night before.
Yep.
And then, usually when I'm in LA, I'll try and go drinking with a few buddies and stuff like that. But I didn't do that. I kind of, had a good sleep the night before the LA game after the Anaheim game. So I flew in the Tuesday. We did the Anaheim game Wednesday, the Thursday game of the LA. Of course, it's going to go into overtime.
How pissed were you about that?
And I'm just sitting there. Now, I've told people this. I'd had a backup plan. It just was going to be harder on me. Right. So the flight was leaving at 11:20, and it was a 7:30 game. LA time, flight leaving at 11:20 direct to Toronto. But I tracked that flight, and usually it's a little bit delayed. Well, of course, with my luck, I'm looking at the flight flying in, and it's 20 minutes early, and I'm like, oh, this is not going to go well. Uh-oh. And you're watching it, and I had another flight booked at midnight through Chicago, so I would have just gotten into Toronto a little bit later, but that would have been more of a pain in the butt. It's trying to sleep on a plane because it's a shorter flight to Toronto and then in. So about an hour before the game, Air Canada, who I have a good relationship with, they sent me a note saying that flight is going to be delayed just for a scheduled maintenance, which was fine. So right away I was like, okay, they're going to maybe be delayed 20 minutes. So to 11:40, that bought me 20 minutes. But then, of course, it's a slower game. They go into overtime. I'm like, and our producer, Sam Cicerello's like, what do you want to do here? I said, I'll finish the game. And then, that's my priority. But we'll get it done. And I had a car waiting for me. I'm friends with Mark Bergevin and Rob Blake and the management for the LA Kings. And they had helped me with a car service.
Nice.
So I had a car waiting. I was texting with him, and the game finished. John Abbott through to TSN, and I was on the road. And I got lucky. Got on the plane. Everything was very smooth. We had a good flight. I landed at whatever it was, 7 a.m. the next morning, and went home quickly. I lived close to the airport, and quick shower and turned it around. Was at Trade Center, I think, by 9 a.m. Eastern. So it was a tough 48 hours, but you mentally prepared. I think I slept well that Friday night, put it that way.
I'd say so. We talked to Abs briefly after that. He said you put the rockets on the back of your feet and just went Usain Bolt down the stairs right after the game.
Yeah, I kind of planned my escape route, and I had my knapsack on, and I was like, okay, let's go. And we had met the car service kind of a couple blocks away, kind of away from the traffic. And it was perfect. Jumped in the car service. We were on the highway, and within 22 minutes, I was at the airport. And obviously, I checked in, done all that fun stuff. So it was it's funny to tell this story because, you forget sometimes the trials and tribulations of travel, right? Like that's the crazy part is that's what I had to go through just to get back for a Trade Center. So it was a good sleep though. By the time we were wheels up, I was out. I had a good 4 or 5 hours sleep that night, probably 4 hours.
Well, hilarious. Yeah, we do the post-game show, and Pillsy and I like, oh, we got Trade Center. We got to watch in case the Sens ultimately make a move early. Or no, that was the day before. Anyways, the Tarasenko one. But we wake up and we're like, wait, wasn't he on the other side of the country just an hour ago? But man, well, speaking of one of the reasons why we had to have you on is you and Travis Green go way back, probably to before you even went in Plains. I saw you played a few games in junior together. Did you guys cross paths? And what are your first memories of your first impression of Travis Green?
Well, so it's funny. Yeah, we go back to when we're 16 years old. We played in Spokane together. And, Greeny's from Castlegar. I grew up in Alberta and Edmonton. We have a lot of mutual friends, and we've maintained a friendship our whole lives. So, it's funny seeing him getting hired. I would swear on my kids. I had no idea. I knew that he was one of the guys that they were interviewing. That's all I knew. And to a point where I found out where Darren Dreger tweeted it out. And I text him and I go, you need to tell me something? And he texted me back and said, can you chat? And I said, no, I'm on air. I found out while I was on overdrive. Right. And I go, I'll call you, after the show. So I called him and he's like, yeah, it's been a whirlwind, kind of keeping it under wraps and, flying in and all that. But I'm happy for him. And yes, we go back to 16, 17 years old. Not many people know about this, but he was a high scoring prima donna, really talented. I think he had 60 goals type of thing in junior. Yeah. And then, by the time his career ended, he went from being this really high scoring guy to being a really good, third line center, responsible, kill penalties, did some fighting, all of that type of stuff. I didn't recognize by the time I watched the starting, and then by the time the end of his career, I'm like, he had evolved into this different player. And it goes to show you that, I'd say this respectfully to everybody, anybody who makes the NHL, we're all stars in our own little bubble, right? Like I was a great goalie in my little hometown, right? But then the league starts to sort you out. And I knew what I was. I was a backup goaltender, but I tried to maximize what I was. Some guys that are special the whole way through. Other guys have to figure out what they are at the NHL level to stay very long. And that's the one thing I would point to Travis Green is he's a smart guy. He understands, what it takes to have the longevity, to work with people, all of that type of stuff. And he's been amazing at adapting all along. So yes, I'm slightly biased knowing a guy for 36 years and maintaining a friendship. But that being said, you get judged on your body of work. Ask Sheldon Keefe today. So it is what it is, right? There'll be a day where I'm happy for Travis, and then I'm sad for Travis because at some point, coaches have a shelf life. But what I would say to people is give him an opportunity, but give him an opportunity with the finished product. And the finished product is what Steve Staios and Dave Poulin and Ryan Bonus going to do to surround that young core with veteran guys to make that team a little bit more grizzled. And that's what's really exciting for me.
Now, as a goalie, Noodles, when you hear that from your perspective, when you're playing goalie and you hear that a new head coach is coming in, What's going through the goalie's mind at this point? Like, is that kind of going to be a major change for Korpisalo and or Forsberg, or not really? Or what's that dynamic like? New coach with a goalie.
It's a massive change, not just for the goalies, because if you've developed any type of goodwill and trust with the previous coaching staff, it's gone. Like, you got to start now. Tim Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, they're going to get longer leashes, right? Like, they're the pillar of the organization. But if you're a third line player, a guy who's, really fighting to be on the roster, and maybe your previous coaching staff really loved you and trusted you in certain situations, that's not the case anymore. It's a new relationship. You're reestablishing, and some guys flourish under new coaches and some guys struggle. So coming back to goaltending, Korpisalo, he played a career high for games last year. Yeah, I think there was some real good pockets and some real poor pockets. But if he's looking to stabilize, at least he would say right now, Jacques Martin knew what he was like, knew his preparation, knew, whether to give him a pat on the back or a kick in the rear. Now it's a new coach. Now you're auditioning, and Travis Green might come in and say, hey, I like you, but I also like this Forsberg guy, or the Sogard guy, or the guy, maybe Steve Stais trades for somebody. You never know. So you feel as a player with a new coach, it's a blank sheet, and you kind of got to go earn it. So that's what will be interesting for me coming into the season this year.
Hope you're enjoying our conversation with Noodles. We'll get right back to it. But first, Pilsy's got a word from our friends with Indeed.
Yes, indeed. There's no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform you need to build your team. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. I'm sure Steve Stais and the gang used Indeed in their head coaching search, and they got their guy. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one easy place. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, do it all with Indeed. One of the things I love about Indeed is that candidates you invite to apply are 3 times more likely to apply to your job than candidates who only see it in the search. Sit back, relax, let Indeed do the hard work for you. Indeed's hiring platform matches you with quality candidates instantly. And even better, Indeed is the only job site where you only pay for applications that meet your must-have job requirements. So what are you waiting for? Join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Start hiring now with the $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer good for a limited time, so claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Now back to our chat with Noodles. And a guy who, for you like you, who's known Travis for over 30 years, what would you tell the players if they were asking, hey, what should we expect from a guy like Travis Green come training camp?
I would say look in the mirror and be honest with yourself and work your ass off, because Travis is really good at defining roles for players. And if he sees a role for you and maximize that, he gives, I would argue, he gives his star players, some rope, some leash to play. And keep in mind, everyone points to his Vancouver record. Those guys were kids. Like, it's similar. It's almost like, it was almost like DJ. He was in DJ's situation when Tim was 18 and 19 and stuff. That was Travis with Quinn Hughes and Pettersson, young players there that were learning the game. Now we see what they are. We see what Pettersson is, what Quinn Hughes is. That's Travis is coming into a situation where those guys are hopefully turn that corner. And if they haven't, it's his job to help them turn the corner and get the most out of them and push them. But I would say honest assessment, realize that there is going to be accountability. That's the only thing a coach can take is ice time. They're not going to take a paycheck away. They're not going to take term of contract away. But you want to play, you got to play and play hard for Travis. And he's a guy who's fair, but he's tough. And I think that's what's needed in the organization is some accountability from top to bottom. And that's not pointing a finger at anybody. It's just you'd like to see a little bit more accountability on a nightly basis for some of these players.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting change for sure. Now, you're Steve Staios. You got the head coach checked off. That's one of your boxes checked off. But in your opinion, Noodles, what should Staios' next priority be for this offseason?
Okay, so if we call the coaching staff, like, let's just call that under one bucket. So you've got that checked off, but you still have to fill out the staff. And I think it's key, because you can't just have a coach on an island. Nowadays, you're seeing most benches have two head coaches or some sort of an associate coach or something, but you have tacticians, you have guys who are great with analytics, like building out that staff. So let's just say he started there. He hasn't finished that yet, but he is going to start there. Now you start to look at roster construction and who you like, who are in your mind is expendable. If you are going to, move one of the core pieces or move a player out that has a contract that would be attractive to another organization, a Chikrin or something like that. Or do you go and you look at the core and you go, all right, we've got a lot of left shot defensemen. We've got to figure this out. We need a right shot defenseman who can play top 2 or top 4. You got to identify who that is, see if they want to come to Ottawa, whether that's a trade or that's free agency. And you got to start moving the deck chairs around to make. I've always said Ottawa has a bunch of good players, but the pieces didn't kind of fit together. So, you got to figure that out. And a lot of that starts with figuring out the marketplace, figuring out if you have a trade partner, and kind of working backwards from that. So, I think it's a great step moving forward if you've got the coaching, staff kind of working on that. But now it's shaping the roster. And we had Steve on our show, like, he used the word grizzled. Like it's no secret you need veteran guys to help these young guys. And I pointed to a game that kind of broke my heart. It was in Arizona, the 3-1. They were up 3-1 right at the end of the second period. And, you could just see the ice start to tip and everything kind of squeeze together. And, if you have a veteran team or veteran players to help those young players, maybe that's not 2 points that you leave on the table that night. And, that whole road trip for me was horrible as far as the work, because I think it was 6 games in a row we lost. It went from Carolina to St. Louis to Dallas to Arizona to Vegas and into Colorado for a spanking. Yeah. Like, it was just ugly. And every one of those games, they were ahead or feeling good about their game, but they just couldn't finish it off. To me, identifying that is, if you're good enough to get the lead, you got to be good enough to defend it or to continue to push. And I think that's roster construction is having some grizzled vets to help get you through to that next step.
And further to your point, Noodles, we talked about the LA game. They got 1 point in that game. The game Pilsy and I went to in Winnipeg, they got 2 points. Sitting in this room, we've seen every road point outside of the Eastern time zone that the Senators got this year. That's unbelievable. 114-1 west of the Eastern time zone. Like, do veterans help obviously within the game, but like getting out of those ruts that you create when you're losing 3, 4, 5 in a row?
I think they do. If you're going to have a dip in the road, or you hit the ditch, I think what veterans do is help steer you back on the road. So it's not a 6-gamer, maybe it's a 2 or 3, and you don't hemorrhage your season where it's just gone because, hey, we can't get it back and we've lost 6. You lose 6 in a row with the parity in the league now, it's tough to recover. Unless you go on some Edmonton run, Edmonton wins 16, 17 in a row.
Yeah.
Dig themselves literally out of a grave. And if you're not capable of doing that, then you've got to be quite consistent. And I think what happens with veteran players is they provide some stability and consistency to your group. And that's what's needed here. Claude Giroux is a warrior. Love him to death. They just need a couple more of Claude's, like not same type of player, but just the veteran grizzled, like been there, done that. Nothing phases him, just goes and plays, can play in every situation. You need probably 3 or 4 of those. And that's probably the challenge for them.
Yeah, definitely. Now, final question for me here, Noodles, and thanks so much for your time. We always love having you on the show. #goalie-friendly show. Couple of goalie huggers here. But Travis Green coming in here, and like you mentioned, you know him well. Which player on the Ottawa Senators do you think could be affected the most by Travis Green coming in?
So I think
good or bad.
Well, okay. So from a good standpoint, I would say Brady and Tim.
Okay.
And the reason I would say that is he will, he will be able to show Brady and what I mean with his tactics. Okay, tonight's the night we need physicality. Tonight's the night we need you to, to dial it back a little bit. We don't need you in the penalty box. We need you over here, type of thing. And I think, Travis's demeanor, the way he's able to press buttons will help that. Same thing with Tim. It's like allowing him some flexibility, but keeping him within the structure of the team. So I think those are going to help. I look at guys like Brandstrom, and if he's on the team, because there's decisions to be made, I look at him and Travis will try and define a role. But if he's farther down in the lineup, usually your fifth and sixth defensemen are kind of bigger and more physical. That's not Eric, but Eric, I'm a fan, and I think he's got the offensive upside. I think he's got some bite. He blocks shots. But I look at players, and you have to ask yourself, and this is why I say look in the mirror, is what are you as a player? The one thing I knew as an NHL goaltender, the quicker I got to reality assessment. So I looked at myself and I said, okay, I'm not going to be a starter, but I'll be a damn good backup. And, I'll bring something else to the table, being a good teammate, a good citizen, all of that. The quicker you can get to self-evaluation and say that I'm not this, but I'm this, and I can maximize it, I think the coach will help with the defined role, but I also think the player with assessment. So the Parker Kellys, the Kastelics, the Brandstroms, Jacob Bernard Docker, you're still trying to figure out what you are at the NHL level. Those are the guys that Greeny is probably going to have an impact on. They're going to control whether that's positive or negative.
Love it. Thanks so much, Noodles. Really appreciate your time. And we'll be checking back in with you right after the Sens draft your buddy Jerome McGinley's son. And we'll just keep this rolling all summer. Get your whole crew involved. Pooley's already there too.
Could you imagine if they get Tej? I mean, Tej is, you keep hearing whispers that he might be third to fifth type of thing. And like, that's how good this kid is. For me, the tiebreaker is you happen to have this Hall of Fame father, the genetics, and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree with Tej. He's an unbelievable kid, and he's unbelievable talented. So it would be nice, man, if he ended up in Ottawa. That would be special.
But how high is your buddy Craig Conroy going to trade up to make sure that he gets him?
I don't know. They're at 9 in Calgary. I don't think Tej makes it to 9.
No chance.
I've read some stuff out of Montreal that what's Montreal picking? 5th, I think.
5th.
Like I've heard, them loving Tej as well. So I mean, it could be a crapshoot because I think after Celebrini, there's kind of a coin flip. Who knows how far Tej is going to go, but he's a hell of a player, and I would love to see him in a Sens uniform because. That way I would know lots of dads. Jeff Sanderson, I know Mark Gregg, who's Ridley's dad. I'd know the coach and Travis Green. Obviously, I know Pooley from TSN.
Weren't you in St. Louis with Walt too?
Well, so Walt and I never crossed paths, but Walt lives next door to Chris Pronger, and who's one of my best friends. And so I missed Walt just briefly, but I always saw him around St. Louis, put it that way. So we spent more time drinking beer than playing. And then who's the other one that I have a history with? I'm drawing a blank.
Well, there's so many on the
I played with Steve Staios.
Of course.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
There you go. So I know the organization well. I speak highly of them. And I think there's, you can never have too many good people in the organization. And that's what they're doing. They added a good person in Travis Green. Now he's got to get to work because there's, I'm sure there's you guys know the market. There's a lot of people that are questioning the hire and saying, why not this coach X? Why not coach Y? All I would say is give it some time, trust the process, and, see what happens, because ultimately it's the players on the ice that have to make the coach look good.
They certainly do. Thanks for this, Noodles. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys. We'll chat soon.
Pillsy. Hope everybody enjoyed that conversation with Noodles. He is just one of the good guys in the game, and Really good insight there, not only on Travis Green, but also what the Senators need to do this offseason with goaltending and with adding veterans. Pilsy, if I said that there was going to be over under 3.5 new players added this summer to the Senators with over 500 games of NHL experience, would you go over or under?
Ooh, the last part changed things for me. I think under. Finding guys available with over 500 games might be difficult. So I think they're going to get 1 or 2 of those guys for sure. So, but not 4.
I think they need 3 or 4.
Yeah, 3 would be nice. But I mean, well, yeah, it depends on so many things for sure.
2 defensemen at least and a forward. That's where I would draw it, and 2 and 2 would be even better.
Yeah, 2 and 2. Well, but then goaltending as well. That'll be interesting to see what direction they go there.
By the way, I'm all in on Jacob Markstrom, by the way, being the Senators goaltender for the next 2 years. You might look back at Travis Green's time in both Utica and Vancouver. Jacob Markstrom was his guy.
They're going to have to outbid New Jersey, which will not be easy.
And a good point as well that we heard from someone too, where it's like, hey, what was his injury at the end of last season? Is this something that could linger when it comes to Jacob Markstrom? But we will dive into what could be available this summer a little bit later on, because Pilsy, exit interview for Mark Kastelic. The Casty season was one of some highs and some lows as well. How did you think he looked throughout the most he's ever played in a single NHL season?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like there were some times where he was doing his role perfectly, and then there was other times where he needed an assistant coach and a head coach to come let him know, hey, that ain't going to cut it anymore. I'm talking, of course, Casty's most famous moment of this season was when Jacques Martin and Danny Alfredson came on the bench. This was early on. Might have even been the first game, Ross. I think it was in Arizona. Puck goes in the corner. Casty goes to get it. Doesn't finish his check. Doesn't even check the guy, and then heads off to the bench for a quick, easy change. Alfie goes to him right away, chats with them. And then when Alfie's done chatting with him, telling him, hey, you can't fly by guys like that when you're an absolute unit on the fourth line. Hitting guys is your number one job. Alfie talks to him, and then even Jacques is like, no, I got to let him know that's not acceptable either. So those are the kinds of things with Casty. You're looking at it and you're like, you have the size and strength. He's among the top finishers in the physical evaluations on this team every single year. You have the body to be an absolute monster on the fourth line, and you don't utilize that size enough. So I would say the biggest knock on Casty is he has the size, but he doesn't utilize it the way he should to be an effective fourth liner.
That clip you mentioned was actually from Jacques Martin's first game behind the Senators.
So it
bench.
was in Arizona. Yeah. Okay.
It was in Arizona, and Mark Kastelic finishes the year with 63 games played. I should correct myself. He played 65 last year, so this isn't the most per se that he's played. 5 goals, 5 assists, -5, 10 points with a 48.8 expected goals percentage. Now, say something nice about Mark Kastelic. This guy will win you faceoffs, 54.4% in his NHL career through 144 games. He's over 56%. Very solid numbers. And he's a Swiss Army knife from the sense that you know there's more there. Like this guy, that's what's frustrating to me about Mark Kastelic is that, yeah, he's a fourth line center. He gets paid like a fourth line center, but like he has hands at times. Like you can see him. It just sometimes it's the consistency, which is the hardest part. And I almost feel like, and I this is a positive in life, but it might be a detriment in the role that he's playing. I feel like he's too smart. Like I want him to think less on the ice. Just go out and hit. Like the best thing that, like, I know we always compare to Chris Neal when it's like you want physicality. The first shift of the game, he would not come off the ice unless he ran someone through the boards. I want that mentality from Mark Kastelic. I want him to just be out there saying, I have to be the most physical version of myself to have success. Like that, you know who he should be modeling his game after in Nashville? That Michael McCarron guy who got drafted as like, more of like oh, could he be a top 6 guy? He's like, no, to be in the NHL, I have to be a prick to play against every single night. And some nights we get that from Casty, but sometimes, and I mean, sometimes even his fights, they just feel like not staged, but it's like he's helping someone else ask him to fight. I want him to push the envelope, and I want him to be a guy who people hate playing against. And I don't think a lot of people who play against Ottawa would even really consider that Kastelic's on the team. And I think that needs to change going to next season. He needs to make his presence felt night in, night out.
Yeah, I agree. That's the thing. The blueprint for Casty to be successful on this team is there. Like, the opportunities are there. He has everything he needs. He just needs to go out and do it. And I want him to be more physical as well. He finished with 126 hits, good for 5th on the team, behind only Brady, Parker Kelly, Artem Zub, and Ridley Gregg. Like, if Ridley Gregg is able to get more hits than you, mind you, only 3 more, so not insane, but a guy of his smaller stature is able to be that physical, there's no reason why you can't be more physical than that. So I would love that. Ross, this might be a crazy idea, but I just thought of a different way to get Casty involved here.
How?
Is it that crazy to think about putting him on the second power play unit? Because look,
I think they've tried that at times where he just stands in front of the net.
Exactly. Yeah, because his face-off percentage, you mentioned it, 54.4 overall, took 349 draws, won I don't know. I don't see that winning numbers.
54% of them. Do the math, guys.
54.4% of them. But Ross, what I'm looking at here, and small sample size, only 4 draws, but power play face-off win percentage, 100%. Now, the reason I know a little bit of tongue-in-cheek here, Ross, but here's my thinking. Casty is the type of guy on draws where I don't think he's snapping them back cleanly. I think he uses his size to tie guys up. So if you're taking a draw on a power play, you're already outnumbering them. So if you can just tie that puck up and tie the centerman up and then have your extra man come in and scoop it up, I think you can have a lot of success. And then he's just a big body in front that distracts the goalie and distracts one of the defensemen and allows the other 4 players to move the puck around. And maybe he bangs in a tip or a rebound here or there. So that could be another way you get Casty involved. I'm not saying it's that's the key to solving their power play woes, for sure not. But this is a guy that has 1 more year left on his deal, Ross. So he's going to be here next year. I'm quite certain. I don't think they trade him. So I think if you're Casty, you need to be more physical, and maybe you'll get opportunities like this when the coaching staff sees you're doing what you're supposed to be doing 5-on-5 at the 4th liner. How can we get you involved in other ways? And his face-off percentages have always been among the best on this team, and I think he's going to keep that going. So there is value here for Casty.
Yeah, 1 year left at $800,000, $835,000. He's 25 years old. He will stay that age throughout the season until March 11th. Pilsy, how many faceoffs do you think Casty took on the power play last year?
I told you, 4.
Yes, 4 for 4. There you go. Love that.
100%.
So what would that to you would be? I think we're probably in unison on this. For Mark Kastelic to be a successful NHLer, at least in Ottawa, he needs to have a bit of a different mentality of how he's going to attack. Attack should be the first and only word in his vocabulary every time he's out on the ice. But if he can do that, there is a good player, not only a good player, Pilsy, there's a player that scored 50 goals in junior. Like, you have to have good hockey sense.
That was a captain.
You have to be a good leader for that. And hopefully Mark Kastelic can take the next step in his development next season, a contract year for Mark Kastelic. Let us know in the comments what you feel Mark Kastelic could bring next season and what he did this past season for the Ottawa Senators. All right, exit interview for Parker Kelly, a favorite of Jacques Martin. Parker Kelly's season was one of consistency, 80 games for him, and even played on the second line for a couple nights. I don't think that's a recipe for success long-term, but Parker Kelly showed that he could be a guy that coaches rely on to play the right way, do the right thing. 8 goals, 10 assists for 18 points. He was -8 this season with a 47% expected goals at 5-on-5. How would you describe the season that was for Parker Kelly?
I think it's going to be very interesting going from Jacques Martin to Travis Green for Parker Kelly, because I think Parker Kelly can thrive under both these guys, right? Like there's some players where you're looking and you're like, this switch is going to affect them. We talked to Noodles about that. But Parker Kelly, this guy has been an absolute workhorse his entire career, an undrafted player that has 177 games played under his belt, 4 seasons in the NHL. And he's not a big guy either. It's 6 foot tall, 187 pounds. You know, he doesn't have that size that Mark Kastelic has that would make things easy for him to be a fourth line center or player, sorry. So if you could take Parker Kelly's mentality and put it into Mark Kastelic's body, you'd have a perfect fourth liner, in my opinion, right? Like Kelly's a guy that goes out there, he bangs bodies, second on the team in hits, only behind Brady Tkachuk. Now, the gap here is pretty big. Brady Tkachuk with 294 hits, Parker Kelly with 171. But he's a guy that bangs bodies out there. He's blocking shots with 67, good for 8th on the team. He is one of the big parts of this team's penalty kill, as his time on ice on the penalty kill is one of the tops here. 3rd on the team with 175 minutes, only behind Sanderson and Artem Zub. So he's the top forward on the penalty kill. So this guy brings a lot to the Ottawa Senators as far as like your bottom line player goes. And I think he can have success doing that. I like Parker Kelly. We're going to see what happens with him in the offseason with his next contract. But I think this is a guy that can stay in this lineup and at the very least should be an extra forward for this team.
Parker Kelly is arbitration eligible as a restricted free agent. He was making $762,000 last year. I think you completely nailed it with being able to combine Kelly and Kastelic into one player.
Yeah.
You could have a really good fourth liner with that. It's just about finding the way for Parker Kelly to impact the game at different parts of it. Now, you mentioned 171 hits. That's great. Funny enough, that's actually a far cry below his hits per game last year. He had one more hit in 25 less games last year. He was hitting everything, had 172 hits in 55 games. But you know what? I'll trade that based on 1 goal last year versus 8 this year. So you know what? Step forward for Parker Kelly, undrafted, 2-time Jonathan Petra Award winner for hardest worker at development camp, a leader in the locker room. I'd imagine he's a guy who could, I think there was one game where they came back. Was it against Nashville at home where they said Parker Kelly stood up in the intermission and let the guys hear it. He's a guy who Claude Giroux's been on record saying everybody in the locker room respects him. His kind of the way he got to the National Hockey League, got to score a goal, I believe, in Edmonton this year, which is his hometown or close to it in Camrose. So I think all of that adds up to a guy who he's like an organizational depth piece, right? I think that every organization has these guys, but for Ottawa, it's good that it's Parker Kelly, and I hope that they can figure out 1 or 2 year contract. Not the kind of guy you're going to lock into a 3, 4, 5 year deal, but he is someone who he's working hard. He's trying to get better every day, and he does have a bit of upside. He's a pest, and he could be a guy that in a playoff series, you're happy that you have him on your team. So I'm hoping for more of the same for Parker Kelly this season than last. Maybe I'd like to see him do a little bit more on the penalty kill, because as we know, the team as a whole wasn't great, but he is aggressive at the top and pressures defenders to make plays, and has been able to get a shorthanded goal in two shorthanded goals this past season. So all that adds up to a guy who I would like to see back with the Ottawa Senators. I need either one or Casty in the top 12. I think the other should be the 13th forward, and it's no worse for wear if that alternates here and now. And let's get some final thoughts. What you thought of Parker Kelly, or what your expectations are for him next season?
Yeah, I think funny enough, too, I'm pretty sure Kelly and Casty live together, so they can definitely build a lot more chemistry on that fourth line, Ross. I think it would be so great if you could find a veteran mentor for them on that fourth line, like a guy, like a similar guy to who's the part of the fourth line on the Islanders that have been together for years, Martin Cizikas and Clutterbuck. Yeah, so obviously those guys probably aren't getting broken up, but
Matt Martin,
a guy. Well, there you go. A guy like that's done that role for a long time and can really drill into their heads. Guys, you guys are going to be on minimum deals, 1 or 2 deals. If you want to stay in this league for a long time, you got to grind and you got to play the right way. A guy that can really teach them that. So I think that would be one of those veteran forwards you're talking about, Ross, that could have an impact on this team.
All right. And that is the season that was for Parker Kelly. All right. Exit interview for Dominik Kubalik. Disappointing. Really disappointing. $2.5 million in the DeBrincat trade. Comes in. Say something nice about Dominik Kubalik. Awesome 2-goal performance against the Leafs to get that win on the road to start the season. That was like a third of his points all season. So I don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't really care to really break down his season. He's not going to be back. 11 goals ain't bad when you consider how much of a non-factor he was away from the puck. He looked like he didn't want the puck. And we almost joked about that because so many of his goals were on one-timers. This, to me, though, is, I don't have much more to say. Minus 30, I think, kind of tells the tale.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on Dominik Kubalik. Disappointing is the perfect word, Ross. Send him to the moon. This guy cannot see another game in an Ottawa Senators jersey. And it's the worst part, Ross, is there's so much potential here. Like, you look at his seasons, this guy's getting 15, 20 goals every year. Like, if he could have just added 5 or 6 more goals, maybe 10 more assists, it would have been a respectable season. And this roster would have worked out perfectly. You had Tarasenko, that top 6 sniper that they needed to replace DeBrincat, and then you wanted to add goal scoring to your third line. If he could have put 20 goals in on the third line and not been a complete zero, this roster could have been really nice. But yeah, the Kubalik experiment was probably one of the worst performances and underwhelming stat lines of any player that we've seen in a long time coming to Ottawa, which is saying something.
And I think what really tells the tale, and this is where advanced analytics meet the eye test, his on-ice expected goals percentage at 5-on-5 was 38.6, which is by far the lowest among any player that played more than just a call-up. The next closest is Travis Hamonic to also kind of hammer down the point that it does kind of impact how well a player's playing on the ice. Any final thoughts on Dominik Kubalik? Because I don't really care to break down his season.
It's going to be interesting to see where he ends up, because I think a team could find a use for him. And everywhere else other than Ottawa, he's had success. So we'll see what happens to him. But see you, Kubi.
Yeah, it was a great nickname. Kubi! Kubi! Thank goodness they didn't. I know he said coming in the year he wants a long-term contract. Hey, congratulations to Dominik Kubalik. Maybe named his son Mark, but he actually just had a kid today. He's in Czechia playing for the World Championships and might not play tonight because his partner gave birth. So you know what? That's probably a nice way for him to turn the page after what would be a tough season for him. And we wish him all the best going forward. Not that he was a bad guy or anything. He just was a bad hockey player for the Ottawa Senators. Did not fit. 4 assists. 4 assists.
Wow.
Amazing. That was the season that was for Dominik Kubalik. Very detailed breakdowns like you come to expect here. Locked on Senators. Pillsy, any final thoughts on today's show?
Yes, final thoughts for me. I'm embarrassed, Ross, that I forgot to put my Belleville jersey back in my hanger here. That's probably why they lost that game, actually. So hand up, that's on me. My bad. Go Belleville, go. This is a huge game for them. I don't want to see them knocked out this way. Let's at least bring it to one more game. I feel confident these boys can get it done.
All right, Pillsy. I'm going to take that energy into tonight as well. Thank everyone for listening to the show. A reminder, if you missed it yesterday, we did a mock draft, top 8 mock draft. Draft season officially begins on Monday. There's a few sons of former NHLers that are in this draft class, so we're going to have prospect profiles on them and start our top 80 countdown. Tickets have been purchased. We are going to the draft, and it is time to get fired up now with 6 or 7 weeks until the festivities in Las Vegas. For today, we say goodbye. Thank you so much for listening, watching, enjoying. Have a great weekend, everyone. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.